Mo, who are you? What are you doing here? Who let you on my channel?
All right. So, yeah, I'm Pastor Mo. My full name is Moisés Pacheco. I'm a ghetto Puerto Rican kid from the west side of Chicago, but I'm also an ordained pastor within the Christian Reformed Church. Many people recognize that denomination as Paul Vanderklay's denomination. I've kind of entered this little corner through the little Bridges of Meaning groups. One started up in the Chicago area. I started attending. As a group, we put on like a couple-day event with Paul and Bethel McGrew this past summer. I was able to meet people through that. So my story would have to probably start off with my parents' stories. Both my parents are Puerto Rican. They were actually born in Chicago. Their parents, all of them, came over shortly before my parents were born, each of them. So it's very similar to like an immigrant story. But they grew up in like the 60s. There was a lot going on in the 60s. My mother was part of an organization called the Young Lords, which was the Puerto Rican equivalent of the Black Panthers. She knew most of the Black Panthers. Fred Hampton was famously killed in Chicago. She was friends with Fred. So she came from very activist lifestyle as a teenager. My father was very into rock and roll and, drugs and rock and roll. Spent some time in prison. Shortly after his prison time, he met my mother at a Bible study. And both of them were in really rough times in their life. But they met. The Bible study became a church. They became my parents, and I grew up with them as my parents. And that church was the church I grew up in, which was an evangelical free church. Denomination started by the Scandinavians. Those were good points in my life. We did well with one band. Our highlight was opening up for Gnarls Barkley back in the day at Fest. And then my second group, we had a couple of highlights. We opened up for the Roots at the House of Blues in 2010, and we also were able to represent Chicago hip hop at the World Expo in Shanghai in 2010. So that was like my dream. My goal was to be a musician. And then I met my wife, and we got married, and that pretty much crushed all of my dreams, or at least what I thought all my dreams were at the time. Ended my music career, but to a certain degree, she helped me discover what my dream really was, and that was to be a husband and a father. I look back fondly on my musician days, but I can honestly say I enjoy being a husband and a father way more than any performance I had. And so I found that there weren't a lot of these higher churches on the west side of Chicago. So I decided to plant one. And so I got ordained within the Christian Reformed Church. And for the past couple of years, I've been working on a church plant on the west side, which has been challenging with COVID, but it's been great work and I've been enjoying it. And before the Kathy Newman interview. But when I would talk about him around my in-laws, they kind of thought I was a bit of a weirdo about that. They didn't really know who Jordan Peterson was, and maybe I'm just this fanatic. But they typically trust just about anything that comes from the CRC.
Okay.
They were all born and bred in the CRC. And so my mother-in-law came across Paul Vanderklay talking about Jordan Peterson. And because you had a CRC minister talking about him, okay, he might just be okay. And so she found out that there was this Bridges of Meaning meetup that kind of initiated around Paul Vanderklay happening in the Chicago area, and called me and said, "Oh, you should go check this out." And so to appease her, I did. But I met some really cool people. I met Hank. I met Sam. I met another guy, Dan Wagon Maker, who I've become really close friends with since, and have met a lot of other people. And then later on, I found out that CW was following some of the same people, and it kind of went from there.
So I started talking to you, and it was like, this guy's perfect. And a little while ago, I passed off the electronic controls to the discussion group that I kind of started with some people about this stuff. And I directed you to go talk to some of the people I've been talking to, and everybody's been really excited. I am incredibly excited because I think you check a lot of really important boxes. What's your vision for what you're doing, and if people want to help, how they can help, how they should contact you?
Sure. Yeah. So I've talked to a lot of people, even before I ever talked to you about it, just about, to a certain degree, the amount of chaos involved in this little corner because it wasn't really structured. And to a certain degree, part of the limited involvement that I've had is just the chaos. Like, for example, I'm on the Discord server, but I'm not very active in the Discord server just because it's really hard for me to keep up. Maybe that's just me getting old, but it's like there's so many things going on, it's hard to keep up. Similar with a lot of the different channels. There's so many channels to keep track of.
Well, also, I mean, you say the Discord server, but obviously there's Bridges of Meaning, which is a prominent Discord server, and where a lot of us talk. But Pajot has his own Discord server. Vervaeke has his own Discord server. And then there's all of the tons of smaller Discord servers that we have.
Then what it ought to be like, hey, well, we really want to stay away from becoming like this. And, people are going to balk at being overly structured and whatnot. And so I think that one of the best ways to move forward would be to kind of start a foundation that exists, not necessarily to be over this corner and say, hey, you can do this or you can't do this or yada, 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 but really a foundation kind of to support from underneath. And to a certain degree, that kind of goes with my personal philosophy of leadership, and to a certain degree, how I believe the Bible teaches about leadership.
It's what Jesus says.
Supporting from the foundation.
It's, and I think for yourself. It is an idiotic thing to say, think for yourself. If you are thinking for yourself, you have decided that you want to field an army of one in a battle royale where there are people with large armies. That's not going to go well for you. Do not think for yourself. Think for yourself. All cognition is in some part outsourced. If you think that you are thinking just for yourself, that you are not influenced by anyone else, you're just being silly and stupid.
Propaganda is one of the 4 P's of knowing, isn't it?
Exactly. That is one of the crowning achievements in my life. It was to be made a music video by Chris. And we have a lot of people with a lot of talents in this little corner.
Yes, that's true. There are a lot of, and that can be intimidating for a lot of people. It's like, okay, well, what might I have to offer to this? And that's why you need somebody like me who's arrogant enough to think that I can offer something.
I was hearing in the little rumblings was, if you're a channel who's contributing good things or work or whatever, you could be kind of shuttled further up the hill. Now, the question is will I be subject to theological standards of, and then you said, well, no, but then you're like, well, but if they're Satanists, then probably not. But
not necessarily. It's more like this idea that I'm not going to say something like anything goes. So I wouldn't go that far, but I don't plan to try censoring people, so to speak.
Well, right. Censoring is different than
choosing who to uplift and whatnot.
Yeah, because that's kind of like why I like what has gone on naturally is that people have voted with their feet, so to speak.
But the idea is basically to support what exists already. So the idea would be there's all these channels. There's even people doing events. So I kind of envision this organization having 3 pillars. One pillar would have to do with the channel, hosting some kind of live stream that people can jump in and on. And then through that, people can get to know whoever's jumping in and decide, hey, I want to follow this guy's personal channel. I want to do more on this guy's channel and whatnot. And then even people like that are seeking to create their own channels, they can meet other people, learn how to create a channel, get advice there. If they're seeking funding of some sort, hey, I would like to create a channel or do more with my channel, but I need funding. Well, then maybe our organization will help network them with other people who might be interested in doing that. So that's one pillar. It has to do with the channels. The other pillar would have to do with the events. We've had several in this little corner, several events that have been hosted successfully. Let's say somebody in Phoenix is like, well, I want to try to host some kind of event for my community, but they've never done that before. Well, you have people like Sam that's put together an event. You have Catherine that put together the event in Thunder Bay and others that have already created those tracks. Well, I might be able to connect them with those people, and maybe other people would like to help with funding those events, and just to support them. So I wouldn't necessarily be interested in us putting on these events ourselves and trying to take control over all the events, but whatever events other people are trying to do, okay, well, how can we help make those successful? What about me? I've always been that dissenting. I've been that for most of my life. I was in a band years ago and was voted out of this band right before we were about to be signed because I would often provide a dissenting voice. Similarly with the church, I was actually pretty much kicked out of the church I grew up in because whenever there was a congregational meeting, I was the one guy that killed the unanimous decision. It wasn't unanimous because I voted against it and the leaders didn't like it. And so I very much value the dissenting voices and accountability in that way.
Yeah.
Well, pretty soon I'm probably going to take your account away and give it to Mo because Mo's gonna become the new admin of this whole StreamYard thing. CW should actually jump in here.
But I had a moment. I was planning to go into the Air Force. My swearing date for the Air Force was September 11th, 2001.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I obviously was not allowed to swear in that day.
Okay.
And, the Air Force is not in high demand like Army infantry or Marine infantry. So I was planning to swear in on September 11th, and I would leave for basic training in February. Well, after 9/11 happened, my recruiter called me and was like, hey, you can come swear in next week, but you may not leave for basic training till August. And I was like, well, I'm not going to swear in and put my life on hold for a year. And then one day, shortly after that, I woke up from a nap, which this will sound weird, and I always feel weird sharing the story, but I felt like there was a voice when I woke up saying, apply at Moody Bible Institute.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Wow. And it's the only time I've ever had an experience like that. The only time. I'm usually really skeptical of other people sharing these kinds of experiences. Yeah. But I turned in an application. I turned it in a day late on purpose. And they had these essays to write. And in the essay, I wrote reasons why I didn't think I would be good at Moody Bible Institute, mainly because I didn't think I'd be interested in following any of the rules. And my brother, actually, older brother, had applied at Moody and was rejected. So I was like, okay, I have a good chance of not getting in. But I got in on the first try. Oh, you're as snarky as at least I'm as snarky as I've seen you, or like we've interacted on Twitter and gone back and forth. I enjoyed that a bit, but I think I'm a little bit more timid. However, my wife tells me that the way other people experience me and the way that I see myself oftentimes is different. But I grew up in a rougher environment. I mean, I grew up in the west side of Chicago. I've had guns put against my head. It's one of those things where I can be sometimes jaded, especially if I get worked up. So kind of just a way to start organizing and building more formal connections within this little corner.
Okay. And this little corner, guys, is that a separate...
Well, the way I say it is this little corner is this huge thing.
Yeah.
Right? And so, there aren't really well-defined borders on this little corner. And so my goal is not necessarily to define any of the borders. It's just a way to help and supplement what people are doing. But my wife is Dutch. My wife grew up in the CRC. So did her parents and her grandparents. And so when I decided I wanted to plant a church in my community, I approached one of the churches my wife was working at. And they said, "Oh, that sounds like a great idea." And they gave me all this red tape that I had to go through. And to a certain degree, I appreciated it. I'm Puerto Rican. Part of what happens with a lot of white churches and Latinos is that, "Oh, you're a person of color. Do whatever you want. Just come in, You don't have to have any standards." And that's kind of, I don't like that.
They seriously do?
Oh,
I don't know. My
even
in-laws,
in the CRC to a certain degree, I can get away with a lot in the CRC because I'm Latino. Because nobody wants to be the white person telling me I'm wrong.
Please tell me that's an American thing, because I got grilled when I joined both my churches, where my in-laws went.
Also, what's on your bingo card?
I am not. Is that a reference to something?
Yeah. So Paul Vanderclay has certain things he mentions basically every time. Patterson, New Jersey, the Dominican Republic. What else is on the bingo card? CRC is taking over this channel. The CRC has already taken over my channel. This is why Mo is here, in order to start a new channel and get all these Trinitarian idolaters off my channel.
Well, it works that the CRC is taking over, and then the Latinos are taking over the CRC. So,
there you go.
Like we normally do, the Latinos are actually taking over. Chad is asking me, what does remember embody mean to you?
You must not watch enough Grim Grizz. Grim Grizz.
No, I've heard Paul recommend Grim Grizz a lot. I haven't, and again, there's so much that gets recommended out there. I can't keep up with all of it.
So
he didn't even know what remember embody is.
I know Moishe has a lot of catching up to do.
I mean, I didn't know what remember embody was. If that makes more sense.
I did know the 4 forms of knowing.
There you go.
See,
Propaganda, programming.
God.
I don't even know that.
Well, welcome, Moishe. May your reign be long and profitable.
If you go to the Friday morning Nameless, you can get caught up on everything there. I think
that's a good place to go. Friday morning Nameless. See, actually, it's true, because Friday morning Nameless and Grim Grizz, they do all this accumulating. So if something happens, they'll be there. That's what these channels are important, because it helps you keep an eye on the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
Wait, Chad, do you actually explain what the heck Grim is saying? Because I would appreciate that a lot.
I have a video on my channel, Navigating Patterns, called Deconstructing Grim Grizz.
Wait, were you one of the two that he just
yeah.
What's that thing Paul does where you just talk about other people talking about you?
Yes, the beholder.